Let your speech be gracious, seasoned with salt, so you should know how to respond to each one. Ephesians 4, verse 6. Hello, and welcome to Pathlight Studio. My name is Carol Hunsberger, and I'll be your host for this episode, which is the third in a series, Unlocking Purpose Through Communication, Faith, and Confidence. In previous episodes, I have spoken about the definition of communication, which is the sending and receiving of messages through verbal and nonverbal channels to create meaning. In a previous episode, I spoke about two of the needs that human communication fulfills: the why we communicate, to fulfill the need of affinity, which is the need for human contact, both physical and emotional. And I also spoke about influence. We want to matter to other people. We also discussed two different models. The model, which is the transmission model, which is one-way communication. You have a sender, they put together a message, they send it through a channel, and there's a receiver, but a response is not expected. And then a second model of communication, which is called interaction, where you have the same components, a sender, a receiver, a message, and a channel. However, this time we're using words like encode. The sender puts together a message, and the receiver is going to decode. They're going to unpack the message. A response is expected, however, it's often delayed. Think about a text message or an email message or leaving someone a voicemail message. In this episode, I'm going to have more tools for your backpack. I'd like to offer 4 ideas for you to think about, which will help you when you're communicating with other people. I want to talk about the way we really communicate, which is called the transactional model of human communication. And then I want to talk a little bit about noise and how that can disrupt the message. Now, I know you're ready to get on this journey, right? Come on, Carol, we understand this communication thing. It's nice, but tell us how to discover our dreams and help us to unlock our purpose that God is calling us to. We're almost there. We're almost at the point we're going to talk about faith and how you can get more confidence for the journey. But we need to understand this idea of communication and how we can get better. Yes, I know a lot of communication is just quote unquote common sense. But when you really begin to think about how we're trying to engage with the other and create meaning, it's a good idea to kind of take a step back and analyze what kind of communicator are we and how can we get better. Because one of the things, or two of the things I know, first of all, you're going to have to communicate with someone your vision and what you believe that God is calling you to do for his mission. You're going to have to engage with the other person. And secondly, you want to invite them along. You want them to come on this journey with you because it's going to make it a lot more enjoyable if we have someone to share this mission with. And also, God created a purpose for you to enact on other human beings. There's a really good chance that the purpose that you've been created for in this season of your life is not just for you, it's probably to benefit other people. So before I get to the transactional model of communication and noise, let's talk about 4 other ideas, things that I'd like you to think about to take along this journey. The first one, you cannot not communicate. Yes, I know that's a double negative, but you cannot not communicate. Even when you go, I don't need to talk about this right now. Everything you do sends a message, from the way you style your hair, to the clothes you wear, to the car you drive, to where you live, to your body posture, to the way you're looking at someone or not looking at someone. But everything you do sends a message. And high self monitors are very aware of the message that they're trying to convey. Think about when you go on a job interview, you want to look your best, or that first date or special evening, or when you are going to meet the in-laws. We want to convey a certain meaning. You cannot not communicate. I always think one of my favorite commercials was the Tide laundry soap commercial, that little stick Tide, and it's what you would use if you had a spot. And they always show someone sitting down for an interview, and the interviewer is so distracted because every time the person who's being interviewed starts to speak, there's this little spot, a stain on his shirt, and that's what does all the talking. We get focused in on one thing because, as you'll hear me say several times in this episode, the brain can only do one thing at a time. The brain can only think one thought at a time. So you cannot not communicate. We're always sending a message, whether it's intentional or unintentional. People are going to pick up on that message. The second communication principle: communication is irreversible. When I say something or I do something, I cannot take it back. It's out there. Words stick. We say something, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to say that. You can apologize, but you can't erase it. One of my favorite lines in the whole English language is when a judge will lean over and look at the jury box and go, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, please disregard that last statement. How? How do you disregard something that's already out there? Which means we need to be very, very careful with the words that we use. Proverbs 12:18, the words of the reckless pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise bring healings. You may forget the actual words that someone uses, but you will never forget the way they made you feel. And so when putting your words together, we need to think about the reaction of the other and be very careful with how we say something and what we say, thinking about the other. High self-monitors, they censor their speech. They may want to say something, but they realize the ramifications of what could be said. And sometimes they silence that tongue, right? They bite their tongue and they hold that in and they wait for a better time or a better way to say that. So you cannot not communicate, number one. Number two, communication is irreversible. The third principle, communication is unrepeatable. We will never have that same conversation, that same moment exactly like it happened. Each interaction is unique, shaped by a specific time, place, and emotions. So when we enter into a situation, an experience, something that's going to be a memory, we need to give it our best shot, because we can never go back and do it exactly the same way. One of my favorite anniversaries was our 25th wedding anniversary. My favorite movie of all times was Marissa Tomei and Robert Downey Jr. in the movie Only You, which is filmed in locations all over Italy. Well, there's a scene in this movie where they're in Positano, Italy, and Marissa's running up these stone steps to this beautiful restaurant that overlooks the Mediterranean Sea. The entire restaurant is lit by candles in these giant candelabras. And I told Eric, I want to have our 25th wedding anniversary in that restaurant. Did some research. I found out that it was La Splenda restaurant in Positano. So we went there for our 25th anniversary, and it was everything I thought it would be and more. Beautiful scenery overlooking this Mediterranean Sea. Everything is lit by candles. We were serenaded by people walking around with violins. Beautiful 7-course meal, gorgeous and yummy dessert. It truly was a dream come true. But let's say for my 45th, I want to go back and do that all over again. I want to go to La Splenda. I want to sit in the same beautiful location overlooking the Mediterranean Sea, the same waiter, the same food, even the same musicians. I'm going to wear the same outfit, but it won't be the same because that moment has already passed. When we realize that these moments that we have with our loved ones are precious and they cannot be recreated, maybe we begin to think of what we want that interaction and that memory to look like, because we're not going to be able to go back and repeat it exactly the same way. We need to become, which I'm going to call the fourth principle, we need to become other oriented, always putting ourselves in the other's shoes, trying to think how they're going to react. So when we send a message and we're expecting them to decode it, we need to think about how will they decode it? What is their frame of reference? What is their reality? How are they going to react? What is their perspective of this message? As this sender, you need to be watching the person that's receiving the message to see if they understand, to see if they're offended, to see if they're confused, so that if they don't understand, you have another chance to clarify and explain this message, to adjust the next message that you want to send. Whenever I do these retreats, I'm watching the ladies that are sitting on the sofa, and I can tell if they're getting it. Some of them are taking notes, they're smiling, they're nodding their heads. But if they're not getting it, if they look confused, or I didn't make a specific point, or I can tell there's a question going on, or maybe they're tired, I need to adjust what and how I say next. Maybe it's time for a story. Maybe it's time for an activity. Maybe it's time to say goodnight, that it's been a really long day. In this most recent retreat that I did, I could tell it was 8 o'clock at night and I was losing my audience. They were trying so hard to stay awake and they just weren't getting the point. And I could tell by the questions that they were asking. They didn't get what I was talking about by listing their goals and listing their dreams. So before I went to bed, I sat down and I really thought about, what was I not explaining well to these ladies? Well, the next day I went and I decided I was going to list all of my goals for each different category. And I'll talk about this later on in these series. What were my physical dreams? What were my financial dreams? What were my relationship dreams? And when I listed them and I showed them the next morning on a PowerPoint slide, one of the ladies went, "Oh, you mean what are our yearly projects?" And I went, "Exactly." So she was being a really good self-monitor because she was using her frame of reference to match my frame of reference. And what did we do? We created meaning. Now, Jesus Christ was the ultimate other-oriented person. He met people where they were. That's why he often spoke in parables. Think about the parables of the lost sheep. Shepherds, who he was telling this story to, they would understand that you would leave 99 sheep to go find the lost one. The parable of the good shepherd, shepherds would understand that sheep know his voice and will follow him. So they could relate to Jesus when he said, "I know my sheep and my sheep know me." In the parable of separating the sheep from the goats, shepherds would understand these meanings. So Jesus was always thinking about their frame of reference, actually becoming other-oriented so that he could share this meaning about the kingdom of God. Think about when he called the disciples. Peter, James, John, Andrew, they were fishermen, and that's what he called them. No longer will you be catching fish. You will become fishers of men and catching souls for the heavenly kingdom. When Jesus was asked why he spoke in parables, he responded, "Because they look but do not see. They hear, but they do not listen and understand." He had to go where they were so that he could create meaning for them. They'd have this shared understanding, and then they would follow. So now, thinking all of that in mind, we cannot not communicate. So even though we're speaking non-verbally, we're communicating with the other. We know that communication is irreversible. I cannot take back something that I've said. And we know that the moment in the experience is unrepeatable. And now I need to become other-oriented. That puts a lot of responsibility on the sender. But let's think about this when you are articulating what you feel God is calling you to. You're going to be the sender, and you're going to have to put what God is calling you to in such a way that that receiver is going to understand. When I went to Eric and I said, Eric, I just had this unbelievable experience where I feel that God is calling me to start doing women's retreats. I had to put it in a way that Eric would understand why women were having difficulty at our age at coming up with their dreams, how we were trying to rediscover our purpose. And I had to put it in terms that he would understand. I had to be other oriented. So, with all this in mind, I want to now talk about the transactional model of communication because it's going to get a little more complicated. And again, these are just ideas for you to think about so that when you're communicating with others, you can help create shared meaning. So, with the transactional model of communication, we still have the same players, right? They still have the same elements. You have a sender, they're encoding a message. They're sending it through a channel, a verbal or a nonverbal channel, and they're sending it to a receiver. The receiver is going to decode it, and they're going to offer feedback to the sender. What's different about the transactional model of communication, it's still two-way, although everything happens in real time. Everything happens simultaneously. You are simultaneously sending and receiving messages at the same time. If you're a high self monitor and I'm sending a message and I'm looking at who I'm sending the message to, and I can tell they're not getting it by some nonverbal nod or look of confusion, they're sending that back to me. I'm decoding it, and then I'm adjusting that message. In the transactional model of communication, we send and we receive messages simultaneously. Well, now that gets a little complicated when I just told you that the brain can only do one thing at a time. The best way you're going to be able to understand and share meaning is you have to be all in. You got to get rid of what we call the distractions. The distractions are called noise. There are three types of noise. There's external noise. You hear a loud bang, right? Or you hear some shouting when you're trying to talk to someone. That's going to distract you, right? It's that smoke detector that's beeping at 2 o'clock in the morning because the battery has gone bad, and you're just laying there praying it's not the one upstairs that you're going to have to get the ladder for, and you're just laying there waiting for that beep. It's that crying child in an airplane where you just can't concentrate on anything else because that child is crying. That's external noise. That definitely would interrupt a conversation. The second type of noise is called physiological noise. How are you feeling? Are you hungry? Are you tired? Maybe you don't feel well? Are you cold? I can handle almost anything except if I am in a meeting or I'm listening to a speaker and I am chilly, I am cold, I'm not paying attention to the speaker. What I'm thinking about is how much longer do I have to stay here until I can get warm or until I can go get some food because I'm hungry, or if I can finally take a nap. That's physiological noise. Again, the brain can only do one thing. So if I'm thinking about what I'm doing, if I'm thinking about having that lunch and what I'm going to eat for lunch and I'm hungry, I'm now paying attention to that hunger stimuli and not anything else that's going on. So those can definitely interrupt a message, but they're not the real culprit. The real culprit in noise, in interrupting and affecting our reception of the message, is this idea called psychological noise. Psychological noise is a noise that's going on in your head. It's the zoning out. It's the daydreaming. It's the going on vacation. It's the I go from point A driving to point B and I don't remember anything in between and how I got there. It's just kind of taking a little mental holiday. We do it all the time. It's very normal. It's natural. I'm sitting there. You've probably zoned out while I've been talking. I might have said something about maybe a message being irreversible, and maybe you're thinking about something that you said to someone one time that you wished you could have taken back. Well, if you're still back there thinking about that message, you've missed a lot of stuff that I've said in between. Like I said, it's very normal for us to zone out or to go on vacation, and we have to pull ourselves back. But noise can definitely interrupt a conversation. Jesus knew a lot about going away and not being distracted. Think about the distractions we have today, right? From all of the different types of technology, from the telephone, from texting, from the internet, from social media, from the television. We are bombarded with hundreds of different ways that we can communicate. Jesus's time, not so much, right? There were the scrolls, the written messages, and there was people, and that's it. But Jesus still needed to step away from the noise. When you think about the noise, and we can only pay attention to one thing because we're bombarded with so much stimuli, we need to get away. Matthew's 14:23, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Luke 15:6, but Jesus often withdrew to a deserted place and prayed. And Mark 1:35, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up and left the house and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. If Jesus needed to get up and get out and get away to get away from the noise, how much more do we need to do that? In the first episode, the first of these 3 episodes, I quoted the scripture about when you pray, go in your room and shut the door, and your Father that sees in secret will reward you. There is something about getting away to quiet the noise in our head. I'd like to share with you my prayer spot. This is my beautiful inlet beach at Fort Pierce State Park. And I come here at least 5 days a week to pray, to have a conversation with God. And I just discuss my day, the gratitude, the things that the beautiful, marvelous, miraculous world that He's created, and some of the things that I'm concerned about are what I'm planning for the day. It takes me usually about an hour. And when I get home, and Eric will be sitting there and he'll go, well, did you and Jesus get it all worked out? I said, yep, I just gave it all to Him. And I feel a lot better. So I'm going to encourage you to find your special spot where you can sit down and think about these conversations that you want to have with people, this kind of meaning that you want to create, especially when it comes to your purpose that God has got planned for you. So I have another challenge assignment, and this one's going to be a little more difficult than you have done in the past. When you look in the description box below this video, you'll see a link to a Google document, and it is going to take you to this assessment. And this is your communication skills and your challenge assessment. And what I'm going to ask you to do is when you scroll down, you'll see a form, an inventory, and it's going to ask you to rank on a Likert scale of 1 to 5. 1 means this isn't like me at all, to 5 is, yeah, this is just like me. And it's going to ask you questions about your listening skills, your empathy skills, your eye contact skills. Then it's going to ask you about some of your challenges, interruption, over talking, lack of eye contact. And I want you to fill out this form, rank yourself first. Then I want you to get a partner. And without sharing your results, I want you to ask this significant other to rank you. And what I'd like you to do as the sender is I'd like you to read each one. How would you rank my ability to listen? And there's a description of what listening would be. And your partner will tell you 1 through 5, and you'll write that down. So when you're all done with the skills and then the challenges, compare notes and find out from your partner what are some things you can improve on, and ask them to walk this walk with you and maybe kind of come up with a statement of goals. I'm really going to work on not interrupting, which is definitely describes me. So that's your challenge assignment. So tonight we have talked about several different types of communication principles. Cannot not communicate. Communication is irreversible. Communication is unrepeatable, and we have to become other-oriented. I explained a little bit about the transactional model of human communication and how we send and receive messages simultaneously. I talked a little bit about the noise and then encouraged you to find a spot where you can get away and just kind of be with God for a while, to have a really good conversation with Him. Now, in the next episode, we're going to kind of move away from the communication theories and principles and practices. Now we're going to be talking about faith and confidence. And I want us to be able to walk boldly to this person that God has created us to be. Until then, I hope you find a quiet spot to rest, to kind of tune out that noise and to focus on meaningful connections. And may your light shine so brightly that others are drawn to follow. Be that beacon of hope that leads others to their path. And may God continue to bless you as you step into His purpose. I'm Carol Hunsberger. This is Pathlight Studios. Thank you for watching.